remember the first day we set foot on that abandoned baseball field. Its chain link fences were rusted over, the dugouts crumbling from decades of neglect, and the old scoreboard hung by a single cable, creaking every time a breeze passed through. It didn't matter that we had better, safer fields in the neighborhood. This place was like a magnet for us. We were drawn to it, almost compelled by some invisible force to play there. In hindsight, I wish we had never ventured into that cursed place. I'm the only one left to tell the story, and I wish I could bury these memories for good. Yet, something in me won't let them rest. It's like the field wants its story told. Maybe it's a warning, maybe it's a tribute, or maybe it's just a way to stave off the nightmares that still haunt me every night. We called it Hawthorne Field, after the old sign that was half fallen near the entrance. Nobody knew exactly who Hawthorne was. Maybe it was a family name from someone who once owned the land. But it didn't matter to us, even though the place was damp and the grass was dead in patches. We felt a thrill stepping onto the cracked concrete leading to home plate. It had an otherworldly quiet to it. No birds chirping, no cars in the distance, just the wind and the squeak of the scoreboard high above us. Back then, there were 8 of us. Me, Sean, Kelsey, Andre, Tammy, Chris, Elena, and Timmy. We were all around the same age, 11 or 12, mostly still in that stage where you believe you're invincible. That delusion died fast in Hawthorne Field. The first couple of times we played there, it was almost fun. The field smelled of dust and rotting leaves, but that just gave it character. If anything, it felt like an adventure. We brought battered plastic bats and a single half-deflated baseball. None of us were any good at the sport, but that didn't matter. We were just kids looking for a place away from prying eyes, a place we could be ourselves. There was something about the field's silence that made our laughter echo all around, like we were kings and queens of our own domain. We'd get spooked by the occasional gust of wind rattling the chain-link fences, or a distant clang that seemed to come from the battered scoreboard. But we wrote it off as random noises of an old field. We were young, fearless, until the day we realized we were not alone there. It started as small, almost imperceptible things. The sound of footsteps in the dugout when no one was there. The sense of being watched from somewhere near the outfield. Once, Kelsey heard a whisper in her ear that sounded like someone calling her name. I remember her running back to us, shaking, but we teased her about being paranoid. We just assumed it was the wind or her imagination. But then we all heard it. On a hot afternoon, when the air was still and heavy, we heard a faint chanting. It sounded like a crowd cheering, but it was distant and muffled, like it was coming from underwater or behind a wall. We stopped our game and stood there, staring into the empty stands. There was absolutely no one around, yet the chanting persisted, and it seemed to grow louder, then vanish as suddenly as it had started. Fear would have been the smart reaction, but curiosity got the better of us. We kept coming back. By then, everyone in our group felt the same eerie pull, like the field wanted us there. Timmy joked that the place was haunted by the spirits of old baseball fans who never got to see their team win. Even though we laughed, part of me began to believe it. The vibes were too strange, too intense. Then, one late afternoon, the real horror began. It was a Saturday, and the sun was starting to dip low. We'd been playing since morning. Kelsey had just swung the bat and sent the ball drifting into left field. As Andre sprinted after it, we heard him scream, a blood-curdling, soul-piercing shriek that rattled every single one of us. We rushed to him, thinking he might have stepped on broken glass or twisted his ankle. But what we saw froze our blood. Lying right at Andre's feet was the body of a dead crow, its chest torn open, organs spilled onto the dusty grass. The stench was vile. The wound looked fresh, as if something or someone had just killed it. But we saw no predator, no footprints, nothing. Just Andre, trembling, and the torn corpse of that crow. We tried to laugh it off, pretending it was just an unfortunate coincidence, a stray cat's meal left behind. But the fear in Andre's eyes told us it was more than that. We left the field early that day, promising ourselves we'd come back tomorrow. We were too stubborn, or maybe too stupid to just walk away for good. That night, I had dreams of a dark shape hovering over me. In the dream, it whispered my name in the same muffled underwater voice we'd heard chanting at the field. I woke in a cold sweat and refused to go back to sleep. I didn't tell my parents. What would I say? That a haunted baseball field gave me nightmares? The next weekend, everyone showed up at Hawthorne Field again, albeit with more cautious eyes. Sean tried to make jokes, but no one found them funny. We trudged in with a sense of dread. It was only mid-afternoon, but thick storm clouds gathered overhead, turning the sky into a swirling mass of grey. In the dim light, the field looked even more foreboding. The scoreboard creaked, almost moaning, and I noticed the chain-link fence around the perimeter had fresh scratches, as if something large had raked it with claws. Still, we set up our makeshift bases and began to play. That was the day Kelsey disappeared. She'd gone to retrieve the ball behind home plate. We heard a gasp, then the sound of a struggle, and we all ran over. There was no sign of her, just the ball lying in the dirt and what looked like streaks of blood leading into the darkness behind the stands. We shouted her name, tore around the stands, searching desperately, but she was nowhere to be found. In a panic, we left to call the police. They sent out a search party that same evening. It was all over the local news. Missing girl at old baseball field. They combed the place for days, but found no trace of her except for bits of torn clothing near the fence line. The blood was confirmed to be hers, but there was no body and no evidence of who or what had taken her. Most parents in our neighborhood forbade their kids from going anywhere near the field after that. Some said it was a wild animal attack. Others suspected a serial killer, but we knew better. We felt the presence there, malevolent, ancient, hungry. Sean, Andre, Tammy, Chris, Elena, and I agreed that we owed it to Kelsey to figure out what happened. We planned to go back on a day our parents thought we were at the mall. We were terrified, but there was something about that field that pulled at us like a magnet. Call it morbid curiosity, or call it the field's dark influence. Either way, we found ourselves standing at the dugout again 2 weeks later, hearts pounding in our chests. This time, we showed up with flashlights, knives from our kitchens, and a determination to find answers. The sky was a flat, miserable grey, threatening to rain. We crept through the warped gate, stepping cautiously onto the infield. Immediately we heard that chanting again, soft, spectral cheers, as though an invisible crowd was urging us on. Timmy gripped his flashlight with white knuckles. "If anyone is here," he called out, voice cracking, "show yourself." The chanting stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so thick it felt like suffocation. Then came a low growl from the dugout. Not an animal growl, it was more guttural, layered, as if multiple voices merged into one. Before we could react, something lunged from the shadows. It was a humanoid shape, tall and impossibly thin, with elongated limbs and a head that looked human at first glance, until you noticed the mouth. It was too wide, filled with too many teeth, and it reeked of decay. Its eyes were hollow pits of shadow. It moved with inhuman speed, snatching Timmy by the shoulders and dragging him into the dugout. His screams made my bones rattle. We all rushed forward, but the creature vanished deeper into the darkness, Timmy's shrieks echoing. Seconds later, the screaming ceased altogether. In the faint glow of my flashlight, I saw a glisten of blood trailing into the recesses of that rotted structure. We were in shock, tears streaming down our faces. No one knew what to do, but Sean insisted we go after Timmy. We clambered into the dugout, stepping over broken wooden benches and litter. The smell was unbearable, like 1,000 rotting carcasses left in the sun. We split up, flashlights scanning every corner. Then the chanting rose again, louder and more frantic, as if the invisible crowd was cheering on the monster. I saw Tammy's flashlight drop as she was dragged screaming into a tunnel that connected the dugout to some underground utility room. Chris sprinted after her, but he was yanked out of sight just as fast. I heard bones snapping and a wet tearing sound. My stomach lurched and I gagged, horror freezing me in place. Eleanor tried to pull me away, but Sean insisted we save whoever we could. We ran to that small, dark tunnel entrance, the chanting now a deafening roar. We almost had to cover our ears. It was like hundreds of voices layered on top of one another, shouting and whooping in twisted exhilaration. Andre was behind us, trembling, holding a crowbar he'd found. As we approached the mouth of the tunnel, I caught a glimpse of something horrifying. Timmy's body, or what remained of it, mangled on the ground. His eyes were wide open, his expression locked in terror. I nearly dropped my flashlight. "Run!" Elena screamed, and I saw that shape again, perched like a monstrous spider against the low ceiling of the tunnel. Its wide mouth dripped with fresh gore. It lunged at us, and I turned on my heel, sprinting back the way we'd come. Eleanor was right behind me, but Sean froze, paralyzed with rage or fear, maybe both. I heard him shout something unintelligible before the creature's clawed hand snatched him by the throat. Eleanor and I didn't look back. Andre had already taken off into the field, the crowbar clattering behind him. As we emerged into the open, the sky unleashed a torrential downpour. The chanting grew muffled under the roar of the rain, but it never completely vanished. We made it as far as the center of the field when the monster appeared again, this time circling us like a predator with easy prey. Even through the downpour, I could see its eyes. Those pits of darkness seemed endless. Andre lunged at it with his fists, screaming at the top of his lungs. The creature swiped once, and Andre's body spun away, an arc of blood painting the muddy grass. He collapsed instantly, not moving. Elena and I locked eyes. We both knew we couldn't escape it. We could only try. We ran for the entrance, the mud sucking at our shoes. Lightning flashed, illuminating the scoreboard high above, the number 8 blinking eerily, as if counting down to something. Then I heard Elena's scream cut through the storm. She was gone, her flashlight spinning uselessly on the ground, shining on emptiness. I'm not ashamed to say I kept running. Survival overcame guilt, sorrow, everything. My only thought was to get out of that cursed place alive, even if it meant leaving everyone else behind. The chanting reached a fever pitch, and just as I reached the dilapidated gates, the scoreboard made a loud snap, the cable finally giving way. It crashed onto the field, sending up a plume of dust and mud. For a split second, I thought I heard a deafening cheer, like the crowd had gotten the grand finale they wanted. But I didn't stop to look. I bolted through the gates and kept running until my lungs burned. I don't remember getting home. My parents say I stumbled in, drenched in rain and caked in mud, babbling incoherently. The police returned to Hawthorne Field that night, but again, nothing was found except the scoreboard in pieces and more blood. They found bits of clothing, the broken flashlights, and our battered baseball supplies, but no bodies. Just emptiness. The next day, the city sealed off the field, posting warnings and threatening trespassers with fines. But that didn't solve anything. No matter how many times they fenced it off, no matter how many warnings they put up, the place remained. And every so often, someone would try to explore it. Teenagers chasing an urban legend, thrill seekers looking for a haunted experience. None of them ever came back, at least not that I've heard. I tried to go on with my life. Therapists, medications, even changing schools. None of it really helped. The nightmares are always there. Sometimes I dream I'm back on the field, the sky dark and swirling, and I'm stepping up to bat. Except this time, the stands are filled with shadowy figures, hundreds, maybe thousands, chanting in that underwater voice. I swing and miss, and the scoreboard overhead starts to blink as the chanting grows louder. In that moment, I can feel it behind me, its breath rancid, its mouth so wide it could swallow me whole. I wake up sweating, sometimes screaming, my heart hammering so hard it feels like it might burst out of my chest. I'm older now, yet the memories never fade. The field still calls to me, sometimes as a whisper in the wind, other times as an echo in my dreams. I don't know what that thing was, demon, ghost, ancient evil, or something else entirely, but I know it's real, and it's hungry. Part of me thinks it's tied to the field itself, that decaying patch of earth where no birds sing and no living things thrive. Maybe it's an ancient curse, or maybe it just enjoys the hunt. Either way, I'm the only one left from our little group, and I carry the weight of their final moments in my soul. If anyone is reading this, heed my warning. Don't go near Hawthorne Field. Let it rot, let it be swallowed by nature, or demolished by the city, whatever needs to happen. Let the thing inside starve, if it can even starve. Because once you set foot there, once you inhale that damp, musty air, it's already too late. The field has you, and it will not let go until it's taken everything from you, your friends, your sanity, your very life. I can still hear the chanting sometimes, especially when the wind rattles the windows at night. It's the same tune, the same cold, echoing cry of a faceless crowd demanding more. They want more blood, more screams, more souls stepping onto that diamond of doom. But I'll never set foot in that place again. I've survived once. I doubt I'd survive a second time. And deep in my heart, I know the field is still there, waiting, as patient and unrelenting as death itself,